1, 2, 3, 4.
Screen time, screen time, screen time, screen time.
It's my screen time too.
Screen time, screen time.
Hello, and welcome to It's My Screen Time Too, the podcast where two moms review the best and worst in children's programming, from Netflix reboots and YouTube shorts to Disney classics and Pixar blockbusters. We watch, you listen. Find out what you can tolerate watching for family movie night, what to avoid altogether, and what you'll want to watch alone voluntarily. I'm Deborah.
And I'm Katie.
And I have 3 kids. Tony is 14, and Libby and Nate are 10.
And I have 2 kids. Jay is 8 and Kenny is 5.
And today we are thrilled to be joined by Alex Millam and Kelly Shores, co-hosts of the Dirt Nap City podcast. Dirt Nap City is a super funny, engaging podcast that dives deep into the lives of dead, famous people, residents of Dirt Nap City. Alex and Kelly have episodes on everyone from Walt Disney to Merv Griffin to Colonel Sanders to our personal favorite, Dr. Benjamin Spock. The show is a tremendously fun listen, and we're really excited to have them with us today. Welcome, Alex and Kelly.
Hey, guys. It is awesome to be on this show. I'm really excited to talk about what we're talking about today.
I think this is one of those moments that years from now, when we're all famous podcasters and we're guests on some NPR show, they're gonna ask, like, when did you know you made it? And I'm gonna say, we knew we made it when we finally got to be guests, on another show. So thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining us. So we often tell a quick story about our kids. We're not going to do that today, but we'd like to check in with you. And are you parents?
I am a parent. I have one son, and he is 19 years old. So I went through the Wiggles years, and and I don't know if they were first run or what back then. And we went through the Incredibles and all that kind of stuff. But it's been a minute since we were watching kind of the current things. But the movie we're talking about today was it's more about my childhood than his childhood for sure. But yes, but I was fortunate enough to watch this movie with him because he's home for a break. Yeah,
that's great.
And it is your screen time too, Alex. So it's okay.
yeah.
Well, I'm Kelly, and I do have 2 children, and it's quite confusing in our house because I'm Kelly, my wife is Jody, and my kids are Evan and Tate. Tate is the boy, Evan is the girl. So we kind of like to mix it all up. They're both in college, and they are kind of the same. We had, I think, our big things for my daughter. She was really into The Lion King, like everything to do with Simba. That was her costume for like 10 years in a row for Halloween. And then my son was a lot of Star Wars. But if you guys, do you remember the Imagination Movers? Did you ever see that one? It was these guys, and they lived in a warehouse, and they were movers, like they moved stuff, but then they also moved your imagination through creative stuff. And we went to see the Imagination Movers live like 3 times, which is really something. But yeah, so but it's funny because my son, who is Mr. Cool in college, he will still come home and want to sit down and watch, like, over the holidays, we're going to watch all 7 Harry Potter movies. That's like that's his thing he likes to do when we're here. It's like a me and him thing together. So so they still got a little bit of kid in them, which is nice.
Yeah, and my son likes to get nostalgic only for certain things, like Back to the Future.
Oh, that's
Otherwise, he doesn't have a nostalgic bone in his body. So it is the power of movies that you saw when you were a kid, for sure.
Definitely.
It's nice to know that you've cultivated that family screen time and that it's still working, even though your kids are out of the nest. We have a little bit of follow-up from our last episode. Katie, can you tell us about your Wish merchandise?
Yes. So listeners will remember that our last episode, we reviewed the new Disney animated musical Wish. And I, through some freak coincidence, took the kids to Disney World last weekend. And there was a lot of Wish merch, which you would expect, because we hadn't seen it anywhere else, but they definitely had it at Disney World. And I took Kenny to the store, and he insisted that he needed a pair of Wish ears, even though I didn't think that he had cared one way or another about the movie. But of all the things at Disney World, he was surrounded by a world of merch, and that is what he chose. So maybe that movie made more of an impact on him than we anticipated.
What's on the wish ears?
Okay, so they're like purple sequined ears with like a dark blue, like night sky colored bow and like a
Okay.
little star. This is a famously visual medium, podcasting. I'm like making the motions on my head as I describe it. There's a little star in the middle. So they're cute. I'm
Nice.
happy to have them. All right, should we move on to screen time in the news? Today we are discussing a December 8th article from the Hollywood Reporter, just a short story with the headline, Are Studios Shy to Market Musicals as Musicals by Mia Glupo. So, quick summary of the article. It starts by questioning why studios would be wary of musicals when The Greatest Showman, starring Hugh Jackman, did well as recently as 2017, so not that long ago. They talk about how new movie trailers for both Wonka and Mean Girls barely hint that they're musicals at all, which, side note, listeners will know is something that I hate. So the reason for skepticism about musicals is that West Side Story and In the Heights both had really poor performances, even though that seems transparently to be something you could blame on the pandemic. But then they reach even farther back to Cats and Dear Evan Hansen, which both did poorly. Although, again, this is Katie with a little aside, they were both just really bad movies. The article goes on to say that they probably won't be able to successfully market the upcoming The Color Purple and the two-part Wicked movie as being anything other than musicals because it's much harder to hide. So we'll get a test case soon to see whether one tactic works better than the other. Anyway, we here at My Screen Time 2 are pro-musical. How about you guys at Dirt Nap City? Would a movie advertised as a musical make you want to see it or skip it?
I'm so pro musical, and this article infuriated me.
Thank
And
you.
is that too strong?
No.
But in the trailer to watching Wonka, they had a trailer for Color Purple, and it showed music in it. But since I've seen the Wonka, I've seen several trailers for it, and you would not know that it's a musical. So yeah, you're right. I don't understand. I think there's a lane for people that actually like musicals, and why don't you just market to them? Kelly and I are a little bit older than you guys, but when we were kids, Grease came out, and I can't imagine having a trailer for Grease that hide the fact that it was a musical. I mean, that was a seminal moment of my childhood watching Grease, and we love the music in that. So I think people are just missing out on the right demographic for this. I definitely don't think it works to trick people, though.
Well, for me, I would say I'm pretty neutral on it. I do enjoy some musicals, not others. What was the one? I was actually just trying to find it here. The one that took place in Hollywood that was the big, they're dancing around on the Hollywood Hills. It was
La La
fairly
Land.
modern. Yeah, La La Land. I had no idea that was a musical because I had heard all this stuff about it. And we didn't go to the theater to see it. We just kind of decided to watch it on television or on demand, and I hated it. But
Really?
yeah, I think though because I didn't expect it, like I was very surprised by it that it wasn't a more traditional movie. Now, not to spill too much on Wonka, but I didn't have any idea there was that much music in Wonka. I wasn't expecting that, which I wasn't a huge fan of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or the original movies. So I know they had music in them. I guess I had kind of forgotten that. But I actually was like tapping my toes and really into the way they did the music in Wonka. So I just feel like it's probably one of those things where if you go into it and you know what to expect, you're more likely to enjoy the experience than like La La Land. It's just like what is going on? I thought this was a movie, and it was, yeah. So I guess I'm neutral, but I don't like to be deceived either. I'd rather know what it is going into it. And you just said The Color Purple is a musical. No idea. I had no idea of that. And they did play a trailer for it at Wonka, but I wouldn't have even gathered it was a musical from that. I just thought there might be some musical numbers in it.
I actually have another problem with the way this movie is being marketed, though, is that I saw a trailer that made it look like it was the Oompa Loompa movie with special appearance by Timothee Chalamet. They literally showed every Hugh Grant scene in the trailer and made it seem like you were going to get 2 hours of Hugh Grant So I think their marketing for this movie is a mess, and I won't be surprised if it doesn't do well because I don't think they know what they want this to be.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's
really
very
interesting.
misleading.
I hadn't caught the Hugh Grant cut. Maybe it's for like middle-aged ladies who feel ambivalent about Timothee Chalamet. And I feel like we are tiptoeing into Wonka territory. So should we just embark on our wider discussion?
Today we are reviewing Wonka, the PG live action musical that was released just this past Friday, December 15th of 2023, and we all saw it in theaters, separately, different theaters. It was directed by Paul King, known best in the children's movie space for directing and writing Paddington in 2014, and one of our favorites, The Fabulous Paddington 2 in 2017. Simon Farnaby is the other credited writer. He was also a writer on Paddington 2, and he created the British series Ghosts, which has since been adapted for an American audience, and it's really good. Wonka was based on the 1964 novel by Roald Dahl. The original songs are by Neil Hannon, a singer-songwriter from Northern Ireland. It comes in at a cool 1 hour, 56 minutes. And here's a quick summary. This is Willy Wonka's backstory and explores how he became the reclusive, eccentric chocolate maker from the Roald Dahl story that we know and love. We picked it because we love a musical, and there was so much skepticism about this project from the moment it was announced that we knew we had to see it, and it's one of the big theater movies this holiday season.
Before we talk about the movie, I feel like we have to do a brief history of adaptations of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? So, like Deborah said, the book was originally published in 1964, and the first time it was made into a movie was in 1971 with Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Dahl wrote the initial script, but it was extensively reworked. So Dahl really hated the changes made to his plot, and he became very hesitant to ever license his books for being made into movies again. Interestingly enough, the first movie was financed by the Quaker Oats Company to promote their Wonka chocolate bar. The Wonka name, by the way, is now owned by Nestle, so any Wonka bars you see now are Nestle bars. The movie did fine, not great at the box office, but it was a real hit on TV in the 80s and is thus beloved by many a Gen X and millennial parent, and I definitely count myself among that number. Fun fact that I didn't know before we embarked on this project, Wonka, the movie we saw for our review today, is explicitly a prequel to this movie, not the later Johnny Depp version. I was not aware of this before I went to see the movie. It becomes clear pretty quickly, I think. So the question there is, what made the Dahl estate change its mind? He hated the movie so much, he was like, no one is ever going to adapt this. They jumped through all these hoops to get it done again with Johnny Depp, and then they agreed to going backwards to an explicit prequel of the first movie. And you missed Kelly's little aside there, but he made the universal gesture for money, and I believe that probably had a fair bit to do with it. Possibly also the fact that the later movie, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which came out in 2005, was terrifying and awful. But that is an opinion that might only be held by me, Katie. So moving on to the next movie, 2005, Tim Burton, Johnny Depp collab like Edward Scissorhands and Sleepy Hollow. According to a 2005 LA Times article, Warner Brothers got the rights to make the movie in the late 90s, but the project was delayed because the Dahl estate had total artistic control over the screenwriter, the director, and stars, which is just a lot of control to give not the writers, but the writer's estate. So it's not even Dahl at this point. That movie purports to be a more faithful adaptation of the source material. This movie, despite how much I hate it, is Dahl's most successful movie adaptation ever. I think it came at a really sweet spot for the Burton-Depp collaboration period, and just everybody saw it. So it made a lot of dough. All right, that's all I got for adaptations. Where do you guys stand with the book or the previous film adaptations? Had you read the book? Do you have any fond feelings for it? Or do you have any fond feelings towards any one of the movies?
I was such a fan of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which is the movie from 71. And it was one of the first movies I've ever seen. I was born in 1970. So I don't know if I saw it on TV. I think they played it in the movie theaters, maybe yearly, and I would go all the time. I love this movie so much. It gives me, and in this movie, the very first note when they just play one note and it's just like magic. And I was back in it. And then they showed the golden ticket. I was so into the golden ticket. And I love everything about that first movie. And like you, the Johnny Depp movie I can't even get through it. It's so bad. I hate that movie so much. So I had warm feelings and I was really excited but skeptical when I saw that they were doing this remake or prequel, I mean.
Did you know that it was explicitly a prequel to the movie? Because I wasn't even sure. I thought, is it a prequel to the book or?
No, I didn't know, but I figured with Timothee Chalamet, since he's pretty young, that it would have to be kind of the early version, but I didn't know if it was a remake or if they were trying to redo what Johnny Depp did. I mean, they don't typically do that, but I think Spider-Man does that a lot, right?
Yeah.
Where they just keep remaking the same Spider-Man tale.
Well,
So-
Sony's got to keep those rights, so.
Right. So I didn't know what was going on with the IP for this, but no, I didn't know that was like his origin story or what they were going to do with it. But I was excited but skeptical.
How about you, Kelly?
I don't have the strong feelings about the original stories, book, or movie that Alex has. I was a lot more of a Star Wars kid. I do remember seeing Star Wars at the age of 7 in 1977 in Kansas City with my grandparents, and that was the first movie to ever just blow my mind. Like, have to see it again, becomes part of your life kind of thing. But I certainly, I think I appreciate the quirkiness of the original movie more and more, and Gene Wilder's acting more and more. As I get older, I can see these little things that he did to just make the characters interesting. A little side note, I don't know if you guys have ever heard, there was a band in the 90s called Veruca Salt. Did you know
Oh,
that?
yeah.
Yes.
And I never knew that reference until like later I saw the movie and I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's the name of that band. And I kind of get, and funny story, Alex, yeah, I think you know this, right?
Yeah,
we
one
went
of
to
our
high
guys
school.
we went to high school with was a drummer in that band.
Drummer, yeah. It's not really a big part of like our annual tradition to watch any of that stuff. I don't even know if my kids have ever seen the original movie, but I'll tell you this, Alex, you're shaking your head. I came into this with the kind of low expectations, and I think that really helped because I'm going to tell you, I loved the new one. I thought it was fantastic. I'm just going to go out there and say it. I had low expectations, and it wasn't just good for having low expectations. It was just good.
I wasn't shaking my head because I was judging you. I was shaking my head. Sometimes Kelly and I realized that even though we're from the same generation, we just had totally different childhoods. And it was such a integral part of my childhood. And for him to just kind of wave it off like it's just something that he knew was the thing, but he wasn't. It sounds weird to me.
Yeah.
How about you, Deborah? Where do you stand with the earlier movies or the book?
I haven't seen the 2005 Johnny Depp one ever.
Oh,
but
good. Don't. You can't unsee it. Just, no, keep it away from your brain.
Yeah, the 1971 was a huge part of my childhood. I one of those kids of the 80s that watched it multiple times, probably because that's just what was on and it was limited. But I was super excited to share it with my kids when they were old enough. I loved it. I could sing you all the songs right now, but I won't.
Including Cheer Up Charlie, because that was the part that we always fast forwarded through. We were like, okay, you get it. You're a sad washerwoman. We'll fast forward to get to the chocolate factory.
That's funny.
Yeah, that 71 movie was definitely my touchstone. I had actually never read the book. I started reading it in preparation for this podcast, but as soon as I realized that the movie was actually a prequel to the movie, I gave myself a pass and I didn't finish it. Sorry.
That's fine.
There's no book associated with this current movie, is there?
No, but there's a sequel, and that's actually pretty good.
Is it?
The
The Great
Great Glass Elevator.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Roald Dahl himself wouldn't let that be filmed
Oh, that's interesting.
because of his experience with the first one. He explicitly said, "You're never touching this IP
So
again."
so just for timing, like in a timeline perspective, when did the book originally come out? Because you said the
64.
okay, so 64, and then the movie came out in 71,
Hmm.
and then when did this Glass Elevator book come out?
It says 1972, according to Wikipedia.
Okay, so a year after the movie came out.
Yeah, looks like 72.
Well, so I kind of put it out there, and none of you're all kind of keeping a little tight-lipped. Did you like it?
Oh my gosh, I loved it so much.
Okay, okay.
There were so many moments to immediately pull at the heartstrings of someone who loved the original movie.
And see, I'm someone that doesn't care that much about the original, and I still really liked it. So that's good that it can bring in a new audience, right? And I will tell you, it made me want to go back and watch the original. Now, I think over the holidays, I'm going to make a point of that to go back and watch the original movie. But again, I had low expectations. I didn't even think I was going to have a chance to see it, and then I was like, yeah, I can make it work. And went in there, only person in the theater, and just it was kind of a surreal experience, honestly, to be in there by myself, like watching this big thing happening. And I hadn't been to a movie theater in 3 years, maybe. It had been a while.
Wow. And you got
Yeah.
one all to yourself. How special.
Are you sure they were open?
All
Sure, I had
right.
to hold the film to the projector, but I had it all to myself.
No, it's digital. You just press the button. All right, Deborah, Alex, you guys haven't said thumbs up or thumbs down.
Thumbs up. I saw it by myself. There were a few other people in the theater, but I would definitely want to go back and bring my kids
Same.
over the holiday break for sure.
Yeah.
The parts I loved, but I had problems with some of it.
Oh, I can't wait to get into it.
Don't tell me you didn't like the giraffe. I loved the giraffe.
What was her name? Angela?
No, Abigail.
Abigail. I knew it started with an A. All right. So before we get into the nitty gritty of what we thought, the Dirt Nap City crossover element here in this episode, to the extent that there is one, is the spectral presence of Roald Dahl. Dahl died in 1990, and he was really famous for including a sense of darkness in his children's stories. Did you see a reflection of that in this movie?
Yes, but light touch. Dahl
Not
himself was probably more like the 2005 version. That his books are strikingly can be cruel. Shows adults as really cruel. He grew up in boarding houses where people really did mistreat him, and he hated every second of it. And all of his literature have these adults that are just really mean to children, and then it contains children that are not very nice too. I think the one thing a lot of his books have in common is that he just taps into the idea that kids can be cruel, and he taps into this idea that bad kids exist and that cruel adults are trying to mistreat children, and kids, I think, on some level are into that. I mean, they respond to that because in some sense that's their world too. That's their fears and insecurities. They're having these adults that they're afraid of a lot of times. And I thought this did that with a light touch. And you can do that with a light touch by just having it be super cartoonish, right? So the adults seem scary, but they're so over the top that they can't be real. So they're not that frightening. And I think the more cartoonish you make it, the less scary it becomes, right? That's the trick, probably. And I think in that Johnny Depp version, when you even make Willy Wonka something to be scared of, then you have nowhere to run, no safety corner to run to. So I think there was a dark-ish touch, but I think that I'm not sure Roald Dahl would like this version.
it was too cheerful.
Saccharine.
I couldn't agree more, actually. I rarely say that after Alex has said something that I couldn't agree more. But in this case, I liked the fact that, and again, not being as familiar with the other movie, I do remember the dark elements of the original movie, with the children getting killed and drowned in the chocolate and all the things that happened. But in this one, I like the fact that the man, I don't remember his name, but the big scary man who comes and kind of takes him to the boarding house, that he looks pretty scary and pretty intimidating, and the dog does too. But then he's wearing lederhosen, like you said, and he's and he becomes this sort of caricature of himself that is really kind of funny. But he at one point he's gonna club Willie over the head. He's got a club out and he's just about to do it and he doesn't do it. I like the fact that they reference everybody having a shot of gin, and they're having these kids doing a shot, which again, I don't like that because I want that to be something kids do, but I liked it because they weren't afraid to do that, right? They weren't afraid to make it a little bit dark and gritty. And there was a big controversy a little while back with, I think an episode of Friends after Matthew Perry died. Everybody's been talking about Friends, where one of the characters, Rachel, wore a fat suit, and they were really down on that. And I kind of it's Key, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
Key. I know it's Key and Peele. Which one was he? Was it Key?
Keegan Michael Key. Yeah.
Keegan Michael Key. He wore that fat suit after eating all the chocolate, and I like that they went there. Like I feel like for them to not have done that would have been shying away from the idea that chocolate, is not good for you and can be bad for your body and bad for your health. I guess the only other thing that I would say was a little bit maybe too much for small children, because I know that's kind of the point of this podcast is it good for your children or not? It almost made it like the chocolate was a drug. Like a lot of the songs were just about the high they got off of it, and how it was so good that it made them lucky and it made them smarter and it made them more social, and all those things. It just felt almost like they were pushing something harder than just chocolate.
But don't you think that in a sense is what kids don't understand money, right? They understand chocolate. So that's a way to explain greed to little kids. Gluttony and greed and selfishness is about just eating as much as you can. And it's not just this movie, but lots of Roald Dahl movies and books were kind of obsessed with obesity, and just a lot of the bad characters in those movies were overweight and gluttonous and that meant greedy. And I think that's the simplest way to explain selfishness to little kids.
I didn't think he was a bad character, though. Actually, I thought he was a good guy stuck in a tough
he was
situation.
Corrupt.
He was, but with a heart of gold.
Yeah, I kind of wish we could have done that character's whole arc without the fat suit, just because Dahl has such a problematic history with fat people. He just seems to hate them, and it would have been nice to not carry that baggage into this film that he ultimately had nothing really to do with.
Fair. What it did for me was it took the cruel things he did, like shoving Willie's head under the water, and it made him more comical, like Alex was saying, more of a caricature, and made him a little less threatening.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've already done it. We've moved on to the cast and characters, talking about Keegan Michael Key as the police inspector. Nope. Police chief. There we go. Yeah. That's what I'm looking for. So, was there anyone else in the cast that you particularly loved or hated? Should we start with Timothee Chalamet? What are all of our Chalamet feelings?
I didn't know anything about him and had no preconceived. Yeah. I just thought he was magical.
Oh, he was channeling Gene Wilder's performance, but also making it his own. He's so talented.
I heard that when they were casting him, they were trying to figure out if he could sing, and they found some old video of him in high school musicals, and they put him on and they said, yeah, he can sing good enough. It doesn't have to be great. Gene Wilder wasn't great, but it's perfect. He was perfect in this.
Yeah, that first scene where he's standing in the Gallery Gourmet and he was having that imaginary dance with all the backup dancers that weren't there, and they were dancing with the umbrellas. I had this horrible thought, and I thought, is the entire movie going to be Timothee Chalamet doing a bad Tom Holland impression? Because we all know that Tom Holland has this background in musical theater and he's wonderful in that way. But within 10 minutes, he had won me over as Wonka, because he had the spirit of Gene Wilder without the world weary darkness that Wilder has in the movie. It's just so effervescent. I loved it so much. I guess I'm a Timothee Chalamet fan now.
You know what's crazy? I looked this up because I was wondering, how many years do you think passed between when he opens the factory at the end of the movie and when the movie that we loved in the 70s came out. And so I just checked to see what their ages were. Timothee Chalamet is 27 years old. Gene Wilder, you guys might not believe this, was 38 when he did that movie.
So it's only
38.
11 years later.
So really, if you go by their ages, 11 years is what turned him into this lovable chocolate maker, into this crazed,
Wow.
paranoid guy that had to give it away. 11 years. Is
Only
all it took.
11 years for Slugworth to wear him down. Oh.
That would probably wear me down, though, when you think about what he had to go through.
I think I loved to build on what you guys are saying. I loved how he was so optimistic, and so everything that happened, he just smiled and just like looked at the bright side, the silver lining, like that candy he makes, right? Is he just always did that. And you're right. I guess if you think about the later movie as him becoming more jaded and more cynical and more paranoid, it makes sense, right? That some people start off. So I mean, Alex knows me from high school. I was Mr. Bright Sunshine back then, and now I'm just an old grump. It happens.
I think what happened to Willy Wonka, though, is he got isolated. I think in the movie they say he hadn't left the factory in that the whole time. So I mean, we know what isolation does, right? So I'm sure that's what did it to him.
The fumes.
So, just to bring it back to Star Wars, maybe some terms Kelly can understand. We need a middle segment, Ahsoka style, to find out what happens to Noodle, why she's not there for Willy at the end.
Yeah. She was a great actress. I don't know that actress's name that played Noodle. I also thought that, because you didn't really have Willy's age in the movie. It was kind of you said he's 27, the actor is 27. I guessed younger, he's playing a younger character, but it was a great chemistry between them without being weird, right?
Mhm.
Without, because she was
Yeah.
younger, and
It
when they were
wasn't
dancing together,
creepy.
yeah, it didn't feel like this older guy and younger girl. I mean, they were, but they weren't. It was very like brotherly and sisterly and friends and allies versus anything else, which I thought was awesome.
Right. It was very clear what their relationship was.
Yeah,
I have
they
to list
did a good
some
job.
of my favorite actors. Sally Hawkins was in this.
Mm-hmm.
Who
I
does
did not
she
expect
play?
that. The mother.
Willy's
Oh, okay.
mother.
Okay.
And Natasha Rothwell was the black lady who was in the
Laundry?
indentured person in the laundry. Yeah, she's a favorite of ours here at It's My Screen Time too. And Olivia Colman.
Oh
She
my
was almost
gosh.
unrecognizable.
Were her
Was-
teeth prosthetic, do you think?
They had to be. Let's
Was she
hope
the
she didn't
innkeeper?
go method on that.
Yeah, she was the
Mrs.
and the
Scrubbit.
love
Mrs.
interest
Scrubber.
of the
Scrub-
later hosen wearing tall guy.
So
I'm such a Olivia Colman fan, and she really embodied that part, didn't she? Great in that.
And we mentioned Hugh Grant a little bit.
Can we, before we talk about Hugh Grant, can we talk about Rowan Atkinson?
Oh, please,
yeah,
yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Bean.
Bean.
So if we want to talk about connections we have with our children, I mean, my relationship with Mr. Bean and my son is so sweet that even before he could talk, I feel like we were watching Mr. Bean, and I just love physical comedy so much. And Mr. Bean meant a lot to us growing up. And then he's 19 now, and I looked over at him, and when they showed him on the screen, we just kind of both lit up. I didn't love the role, tell you the truth. I didn't love the role, but he was just Mr. Bean. How can you not like that? I was happy to see Rowan Atkinson.
Always
Mr.
happy
Bean
to
fan.
see him.
And the other two henchmen to Slugworth, I thought were pretty good too. Like they both had like the way the one guy repeated everything. I liked the way his character, kept stating the obvious. Like, okay, would you just be quiet? You don't have to say the obvious. And then what did you guys think about the other guy getting sick at the word poor?
When he would say he couldn't say the word poor because he was so elitist and aristocratic that he couldn't say poor. Yeah, that's a very raw doll kind of thing to portray.
But was it was it was it funny, or was it along the same lines as was it the darker side?
I guess I thought it was funny, and this movie is sort of like set in it's not a real place, it's not a real time period, but it's very like Anglo-British, where there's more people are more open about class differences than they are here. in the United States. So I thought it was kind of very doll-esque, because class is a huge factor in his books and the characterization of all the characters in his books.
Okay, should we move on to Hugh Grant, our resident Oompa Loompa? What did we think of Hugh Grant playing the lone Oompa Loompa we see? Well, do we see two more in his flashback? Okay, the primary Oompa Loompa.
I thought his delivery, he was so British and he was so stoic and he was so, you know, just the way he kind of reclined back and then reclined forward. I'm not a big Hugh Grant fan, but I thought he really did a good job with it, and just especially how British he was. And just a second ago, Deborah, you mentioned about the setting. It was really interesting too, the mix of English and non-English accents, right? So there were a lot of American accents with English accents, right? And so it was interesting to have all this mix of these different accents in a world that seemed very much. I mean, nobody mentioned, I don't know the guy's name, but the head of the laundry from Downton Abbey, right? He was the guy. He was the butler, the chief butler in Downton Abbey. Again, I don't know his name, but very British, right? Very
Mhm.
very proper and very, and so I love the fact that Hugh Grant really played up on that sort of stoic, well, I'll be on my way, sir, kind of thing.
And I like the idea of giving the Oompa Loompas a bit of a redemption from being these like thankless toilers in Willy Wonka's factories with like nothing really beyond that in their lives.
Well, let's just call it like it is. I mean, I've always had a problem with the Oompa Loompas, and I wish they hadn't even tried it. But I understand the problem with making a movie, a prequel to Willy Wonka, and not addressing the Oompa Loompas. But this was something that kind of plagued Roald Dahl for a long time. This whole idea of, in the original, in the first draft, these Oompa Loompas were like 2 inches tall. And they had, I think he said they were 2 inches tall, and you couldn't, their skin was so dark that you couldn't tell them from chocolate or something horrible like that. And then in his second draft, he said that they were from the deepest, darkest parts of Africa. They rescued them from the dangerous jungle. So there was a lot of this kind of, so there's,
Imperialism.
it's always been problematic, the Oompa Loompas. There's always been this thing. And even I think when I was a kid, I never really liked the Oompa Loompas. I always wanted them to go off the screen. I didn't like the Oompa Loompas then. I didn't like this treatment of them. I kind of wish they weren't there. I guess I agree with you, Kelly, that as far as if you had to do it, it was kind of funny, but I was cringing. I'm not a huge Hugh Grant person either. I'm not sure if that factored into this, but I feel like if you took that out, you wouldn't have changed the movie at all. I feel like they just had to address it,
Well,
but
he saved their lives.
that's true. That's true.
And it was interesting too, because when he first described it, as orange skin and green hair or whatever he described it, I didn't even know he was talking about. Like, it didn't occur to me that that was going on. Of course, I'm not a
Oh,
big, I
you didn't
not as
drop
in.
enough clues for you there? I mean, if this is a prequel to the original, this is not canon. Then you have a problem with the whole thing, man. I don't love the Oompa
As soon
Loompas.
as you say canon about Willy Wonka, I'm you lost me.
What, this is not serious enough to deserve canon?
No, this isn't Star Wars.
Oh, but uh-oh, we're treading on some dangerous
Oh,
territory
it's so
here.
funny. Okay.
I think they made the best of a bad situation with Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa, trying to kind of openly mock some of the weirder choices they had made in the 1971 film and make them work after the fact in a way that was knowing and funny. I found it charming.
I think it's a great assessment.
Yeah, I wonder if you watch this one and then the second one, if you would see like the prequel and then the original, if you would see any holes like that, or if it would be seamless. If because it's canon maybe to the book. Now that I think about it, maybe they didn't mention. No, I think he did mention actually that they took them from that they rescued them or something. I don't know.
I
I
have
don't know if it's
vague
canon.
memories of that too. I think that might unfortunately be part of the script in the movie. All right, any other characters or actors you wanted to bring up?
I did think the big mean guy, whose name I don't recall, but I thought he was hilarious. I thought he did a great job, and he was the right mix of really scary in the beginning, and then just kind of a character of himself. Like that was what Alex said earlier is actually very, very right in that you take somebody, you make them over the top, and it's the further you take it and you make them a caricature of themselves, it becomes not scary, but threatening, but in a way that doesn't feel threatening to the audience.
When you remember the movie, it almost those kind of scenes you almost remember in like it was so over the top. You almost remember in that kind of Polar Express animation that they were so the camera was so close to them, and it was just
The
their
teeth and
features were so exaggerated that it
oh,
seemed cartoonish, right?
and I got to jump in on one more. The flashback scenes where they did them in sort of like an old flip, like an old
yeah.
movie kind of scene. I really
Yeah.
liked how they did those. I thought that was really cool style for the flashbacks.
Yeah.
Like they overall just the film was absolutely beautiful, to look at. Lots of things to see, and then those flashback scenes did them really well. Yeah, that was great.
Well, once again, this is a perfect segue into our thoughts on the look of the movie. Did you think it was of a piece with the 1971 film?
I think
They
the
sort-
1971 film looked cheap compared to this, right?
Oh,
Well, it was.
Yeah. Well, it was. I mean, it obviously there's a lot. It was much brighter, much more technologically beautiful in terms of just the colors and the effects and the way everything was so seamless and felt like sort of a real world, but sort of a cartoon world. I mean, you could tell they were sets, but then at the same time, they felt like that whole scene at the beginning when he goes off the ship and the camera's following him down the part of the ship and along the dock, and then you see all the houses on the side of the water and everything. I immediately was like, wow, the scenery in this is fantastic. But I do recall the first movie, which I'm going to watch again soon. The 71 version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was also really rich to the eyes, but it was really rich to the eyes because I think they used real set pieces. It felt like a lot more of that was practical set pieces that they had built for the movie versus CG. I think so much of this current one was CG. You could tell it was fake, even though it looked great.
Yeah, I would say that too. That this did have a CGI feel to it, which that's movies today. Felt like a big movie though.
Right. Right. Can I bring up a gripe about the chocolate?
Yes.
Do you remember the opening credit sequence of the 1971 film that is just like watching the chocolate being made and watching
yeah.
delicious looking chocolate like scroll by on a conveyor belt and be piped out of various tubes? Like, it is a mouth-watering delight of chocolate in that opening sequence. And while a lot of Willy Wonka's chocolate in this new movie looked pretty, it didn't look like particularly good chocolate. Is anyone else willing to back me up on that one?
It looked like plastic in several of the pieces of candy looked almost plasticky.
Right, it looked more like a toy.
Not enough chocolate, maybe you would say in this movie.
Right, agreed.
Yeah, they were all gimmicky.
And the stuff that even on when they escaped from the vat, again, spoiler alert, the chocolate that was on them looked really watery to me. Like it didn't look as thick as it did. The effect of when you saw it being stirred, like what was on their skin didn't seem to match that. That maybe that's a hair and makeup problem.
I too was practically alone in the movie theater on Friday morning, and when Willie looked at Noodle and said, "Deep breath now," I cried. I cried.
Oh, that was a harrowing scene.
He was
Okay.
trying to get her to be brave.
Yeah.
I've got a question about a recurring thing. So often in the movie, they were like reaching above their heads, pulling something down on a pulley.
Was it the laundry?
They did it in the laundry, but they did it in other scenes also.
Oh, the giraffe. She was hanging from a light in the giraffe. Like when I
Yeah,
think
it
the ladder
was in
falls over or something.
a bunch of places in the movie. It was like this mechanical thing where they were pulling things down. Do you think that represented Wonka's dreams? Like reaching for the dreams?
Wow.
making them
Oh.
reality or something else, or was it not even deep?
All right, well,
I
the
like
Film
that.
Scholar Award for the episode goes to
Yeah.
Deborah.
By the end of the movie, I was like, wow, that's a cool thing. I would like to have some pulleys in my house. Like,
Yeah.
where I can just like pull down, make coffee, while I'm laying in bed or something.
So I think it was more. I like your take on it, but I think it was more about the time period. It was supposed to show that it was a very analog time period and things were still very mechanical, Goldberg kind of things. So that to me was more like the vibe of that time period. This is where technology is, right? We still have a bunch of pulleys that you have to do. Things don't hover, things don't levitate, things don't pop through screens like they do today. So that for me, it was more about the level of technology they were in. I mean, even in the 71 movie, everything's very mechanical, right? It's like things, conveyor belts and vats, and it isn't, there's no digital aspects to it at all. Even like the safe that the book was kept in, that they went in, and or the way the elevator came down, all of those scenes to me were very much like what the past people thought the future would look like. This was very high tech to have this elevator, this little panel that opens up and holds a secret book in it, or these things that come down from the ceiling.
Yeah, a little of the steampunky feel to it, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good way to describe it.
What about the music and choreography? What did we think of the songs?
Oh man, I don't know how you guys do it when you watch movies for this show, but do you take notes on your phone?
No, I don't
during
want
the
my
movie?
glowing screen interrupting other people in the movie.
But you
just
were
like
the
you
only
guys-
one in the theater.
Just like you guys, I was the only one in the theater with my wife and son. I wrote starts with song and golden ticket, and I'm in. I wrote that in the first 5 seconds of this movie. So just the first two notes of that song about World of Imagination, I was in it. It said this is going to be something that's going to be reminiscent of something that you remember.
Yeah,
I thought the songs were great. Just that's all I can say is they were fantastic.
Yeah, I loved the threads of the 1971 songs in the soundtrack. None of the songs hooked me, but they all moved the story forward for me.
Deborah, I really thought of you because I was sure you were going to bring this up. But in the scene where Willy first opens his chocolate store and he's beckoning to this elderly gentleman to come in, and they start a song and he holds out his hand, and the first two notes of that song are the exact same interval as the classic "Come with me and you'll see in a world of your imagination." And I was like, if that is going to be their only nod to that classic song, is just like that one interval in that one moment, I will be okay with that, and that will be perfect because even just hearing it lifted my spirits. But then, of course, the full original song comes in at the end, and that was great too. But I just loved that very explicit callback moment.
And I love that they didn't try to do, other than that song, they didn't do Candyman, right? That would have been kind of easy to do.
Right.
To just throw that in there too, which was the hit song. It was like a #1 song, I think, that came out after that movie. I like that they didn't try to go back.
Is it like a drug illusion, right?
I guess one thing before I forget, I want to ask you guys, do you feel like, a lot of people probably listen to this podcast for the idea of should I go see this or not, right? That's kind of the bottom line is it worth the time? Is it worth taking my kids? Does it matter if you haven't seen the original? If you know nothing about Willy Wonka or any of the story, you've never seen the original movie, never read the books, is it still worth seeing? Is this self-contained enough, or do you have to know? I know my opinion on this, but what do you guys think?
Good question. I think you could go see this standalone. I do feel like Willy Wonka is kind of, even if you haven't seen the movie, you know the story.
Unless you're
Maybe
a
I'm wrong,
child. I
though.
mean, as a parent, would I choose for this to be my kid's first exposure to the concept of Willy Wonka? No, but that's more from like a selfishness standpoint. Like, I want them to know and love the things that I loved as a child. We talk about that all the time on this podcast. So I think they could enjoy it without any experience of what came before. I would never make that choice for them.
I don't think it works as a standalone movie. No, and especially if you just see this and you never see the original or the 71 version, I don't think it works at all. That was a better movie. It was a better story. The 71 version it wasn't as pretty, and it didn't have all the CGI, and it wasn't as expensive. But the story about giving an entire chocolate factory to a kid because he won a lottery, and then he behaved himself through these tribulations and all these tests that they put him through, is a tremendous story. This was a
Mhm.
story of a guy who was starting something that demands another movie after that. So I don't think it works as a standalone movie.
All
So
right.
so kind of what Katie you just said, I would also have a little bit of trouble having my children see the prequels to Star Wars before they see episode 4, right? A New Hope, because that was first, of course it came out first, but it's where it all really started, right? So to see this as a prequel before you see the 71 version might, yeah, like you said, it might just kind of get you off on the wrong foot.
Speaking of prequels and just the concept of prequels, do you guys have any thoughts on how you get a prequel or a backstory right? Like, are there any examples of this being done well that gave you hope in advance of going into this movie that this might work? Or do you feel like they're always crass cash grabs?
I mean, the tricky part about a prequel is we already know what happens to the main characters. So you can't
Yeah,
put
it's
them
hard to
in,
create tension,
yeah, you can't put them in that much peril. Can't put
right?
them in danger of,
Drowning
of
in a bout of chocolate.
or even if it's a relationship, if you know they're going to be together, you can't threaten to break them up because you know they're going to be back together. But it does give you a chance to fill out that universe, So something that's not a kids movie or a kids show, not a movie, is Better Call Saul, right? And that's a tremendous prequel to Breaking Bad, for example. But you know what movie I did think was a really good prequel and it worked because it was animated was Monsters University.
Oh, this is a controversial choice.
Did you guys like that? You didn't like that?
I feel like canonically it's kind of looked down upon because kids traditionally aren't curious about what their heroes were doing in college.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
But go on. What were you going to say about Monsters University? I validate your opinion. I just don't share it.
No, I think it fills out the universe, and you don't have to worry about recasting. You don't have to worry about putting anybody in wigs. And it's just a fun get to experience those people again and see them in a different setting. But no, I take your point. I can see why kids might not have liked it. I was an adult when I saw it though, so
Right.
One of the things you kind of mentioned this with the Oompa Loompa story about, how they came to be, and that there might be a different story in this most recent movie, like how it might not line up. That's kind of a problem, is you have all these rules you have to follow, or all this story or canon, if that's what you want to call it, that you have to adhere to. And if you don't, people are going to call you out. Your continuity is going to be, wait a minute, how could this have been this? And I think that's a challenge with it. Going back to what I asked a few minutes ago, is this work as a standalone? I think this absolutely works as a standalone. I thought this movie was a great standalone. As a matter of fact, I kind of want to take not only my kids but my wife and my mother-in-law, because she likes musicals, and I think she would really enjoy it. And she doesn't know anything about the original, so I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just it just was fun, and I think she would just have fun with it. And also, it kind of, with it being late December or mid December right now, it kind of hit the holiday vibe too. It definitely
Mm-hmm.
had anything. It's really funny because I mentioned earlier about my son wanting to watch Harry Potter over the holidays. That Downton Abbey, anything with English, like any kind of English thing, always kind of reminds me of Christmas for some
Uh
reason. And
huh.
so this, with a lot of the English characters and the cast that felt, or the setting that felt like a medieval English town, or a maybe not medieval, but an English town.
Dickensian. It's like a
Yeah.
Dickensian, yes.
Christmas Carol
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
era.
yeah. That's that. I guess that's right. I hadn't really made that connection, but yeah, it really kind of made me feel like it's a Christmas movie, even though it has nothing to do with Christmas.
Well, and that's why they show the original at Christmas time. There's nothing Christmas in it, but they show it on was it
Does
Freeform or one of
does the
those?
original have a mix of, because Gene Wilder doesn't have an English accent in it, right?
No.
He,
That's what the great part about that movie is it had the same. Charlie was American, had an American accent. The three main characters all had American accents, and then all the
okay.
supporting people had different European accents, mostly
Yeah.
British.
Yeah. I kind of like that mix. I like that. I don't know. There's just something about British accents that makes it feel more worldly or stately,
And it's not
Dickensian.
just, I think Deborah was saying this earlier. It's not just the accents though. It's got both an American and British sensibility about it. He says every good thing in the world started with a dream. That's a very American kind of sensibility, right? But then they also say the greedy beat the needy. It's just the way of the world.
You
That's a
think that's
very
British?
British sensibility, not very American. And both of those things exist in that movie.
Yeah.
And they were said maybe 5 to 10 minutes from each other. And they were saying with different accents. So you're right. It has both of those. And I
Did
guess the
Noodle?
quote that means the most, though, that's the most Christmassy, Dickensy one is, well, the most Christmas carolish one is, it's not the chocolate that matters, it's the people you share it with. That's the one that got me too.
Yeah. Well, it definitely has a holiday vibe to me, and I think it works as a go see it with the family around this time of year kind of movie for me personally. Even if you don't know anything about any of the rest of it, haven't read the books, I agree that that would enhance it. I think you could take it to the next level, and but I think if you just saw that by itself, it could be a very enjoyable toe tapping experience.
Are there any bits of good writing you want to highlight? We just talked about a couple of quotes that were really memorable to us. Deborah, anything you saw that you really liked?
I liked the theme of debt, and I want to rewatch it and explore that a little bit more.
That's interesting. Yeah. And then having it paid off and what freedom that brings,
Mm-hmm.
when someone pays it off for you. Alex, I don't know if you noticed this, but did you see what Willie said when he went down the laundry chute?
He said Geronimo,
Yeah.
and that was one of the topics that we had. You mentioned that we do a show about interesting dead people, and Kelly did an episode about Geronimo, and he kept, what the format is, we have one person knows who it is, and the other person has to guess. And he kept on saying it's something that people shout when they jump, and that was his clue about Geronimo. So yeah, I noticed that, Kelly. Thought of you too.
Thank you. I thought of you.
How about a Goldilocks question about the length? Too short, too long, or just right? Just under 2 hours.
A little too long.
Yeah.
I thought it could have been 15 minutes shorter and really still hit the nail. I'll tell you honestly, so I sort of snuck out of work, so to speak. Like I felt like I should be working during those 2 hours, but I wasn't. But what annoyed me, because I haven't been to a theater in so long, was how many previews were played. It just went on. The previews went on and on and on, and I was rushing to get there on time, and then I got there and I thought, it'd be
You
crowded.
had 20 minutes.
I had 20 minutes, and every seat in the house was available. So I guess maybe I was starting to get a little impatient, not because I didn't like the movie, but just, for all that cumulative thing. But I do think it could have been 10, 15 minutes shorter. They could have trimmed it up a little bit and it still would have been a great movie and worked for me.
This is the part of the podcast where Kelly tells you how old he is without telling you how old he is.
Well, I had to go to the bathroom too. I'll be honest.
And there it is.
I was like, I really got to. I got to get to the end. 15 more minutes.
I'm not usually the type that talks about the length of movies. I don't really have a problem with. I have a pretty long attention span, but I thought it could have been shorter because there was a huge chunk of the movie that I wasn't down with. So, I mean, I would have edited it differently and it would have been shorter, but I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, it was coming under 2 hours. I'm fine with that.
Right. How about you, Deborah?
I thought it was fine. I love a 90-minute movie, and this was longer than that, but I thought it was okay.
For a musical, I feel like 2 hours is actually on the short side. So I think they kept things moving pretty well.
Do you guys talk about what age is appropriate for this movie? Because I think younger kids would have been squirming and bored through a lot of the middle third of this movie.
Yeah, I think this is definitely like take elementary school age kids in older, but not for little kids.
Yeah.
Maybe Harry Potter age kind of kids. The kids that are into Harry Potter are into this probably, you think?
Mm-hmm.
What's that, 10, 11, 12?
I would say 8, probably 8 and up.
Okay.
But I also don't think that there was really anything objectionable for those younger kids. So if you're not seeing it in a theater and just watching it at your house, I wouldn't have a problem having it on. If like my preschooler could get up and go to the next room or like go sit on the floor or whatever, that's a different way of viewing it. I don't think there would be anything wrong with showing him this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't think, again, I thought there were some things they did that were a little bit racy. Again, the gin, let's all have a shot of gin when he walks in. But I liked that. And, that's me. That's sort of feeling like I don't need to sugarcoat everything for my kids. And, the fact that The fact that the big guy was going to whomp him on the head with a stick seemed a little bit like, ooh, that's pretty violent, or the pushing him underwater. But like you said, they made something funny out of that. But if you think about what he was actually doing, it was actually pretty cruel, But I think what Alex said earlier is it was sort of the light version of that cruelty. It wasn't quite as overt as the original film.
What do you think? Should we move on to our evergreen questions, Deborah?
So we always like to ask the same few questions about whatever we're watching. So were you able to compare this to an adult movie or show?
Why don't I jump in while you guys are thinking? Because I already have one in mind. So the one that came immediately to mind for me was the great show on Hulu, The Bear. And it was mostly the relationship between Jeremy Allen White and Io Adebari. Adebari, I think is how you pronounce her last name. That really reminded me of Willy and Noodle, in that Willy is like the dreamer and Noodle is there to like remind him how real life works.
And Olivia Colman was in both.
You are so right.
Very different roles.
Yes.
Yeah, peeling the mushrooms.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great one. The Bear.
We already talked a bunch about other prequels, so if you want to grab one of those, that is fine too.
I mean, you mentioned A Christmas Carol already. I was thinking about that when I was watching it, and I didn't quite know why. It was probably the setting. Definitely not the plot, except for that whole idea of it's not the chocolate that matters, it's the people you share it with, and it doesn't matter how much you have, it's kind of the people around you it just had a very Dickens vibe to me. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would go with probably, but I like the Bear answer better, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Bear as well. Now that you say it, that relationship very, very, very much like, yeah, I could see the parallel there. That was one of the things I really liked about the Bear.
Such a great show.
That also explains what the next 11 years are going to be like for him, right? We know what happens. We know what that looks like down the line. It's not great.
Or what he's going to spiral into when he doesn't have her there.
Are they doing another season of the Bear?
Oh, I hope so.
They sure have to. It's been so successful for them.
Yeah, true.
All right, Deborah, what did you think?
Okay, this is not a movie or a show. It's a podcast, but I could not stop thinking about this podcast called Obsessions Wild Chocolate. And it's like a nonfiction podcast, and it's all about the host goes to Central America and he seeks out like chocolate that grows in the wild, and he has to like fight like drug cartels and like go on prop planes. It's like actually a really dangerous mission. Fascinating. It's like a 10 episode limited run podcast.
So he's like a real life Willy Wonka?
He's like a real life Willy Wonka. Wow. Yeah, stealing from the oompa loompas.
Wow.
That'll get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Wow.
That sounds great.
What's the name of it again?
Obsessions Wild Chocolate.
Okay. Very cool.
I also just have to throw in a comparison, even though this isn't a movie or show for grown-ups, but we did also watch Roald Dahl's Matilda the Musical on Netflix this year for the pod. And gosh, 2 really great Roald Dahl properties in 1 year. We are very lucky.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Okay, another thing that we like to do is imagine the property we just watched as if it were made for grown-ups, and we like to cast it as if it were a gritty HBO reboot.
I would just change the chocolate to drugs.
Mm-hmm.
That would be, that would be the thing. And then I would have probably like some grizzled old rock stars like Mick Jagger or something to play the bad chocolatiers.
Oh.
When you say HBO, it reminds me of what maybe David Simon could do with this, turning it into kind of a wire expose of the chocolate industry, and we get to go behind the scenes and see what what is his name, Flickengruber, what he's really, and the cartel. Of course, they really talked about that chocolate cartel. In fact, I think my son said, I would like to see a movie about the chocolate cartel and see what their backstory was and how they got to be. And, we say this in jest, but if this movie does well, we will see all these things.
Yeah,
that's right.
They love universes these days, right?
Mm-hmm. How about you, Katie? Who did you cast in your gritty HBO reboot?
I thought in taking the next step, maybe this just counts as a casting recommendation for the one that comes after this, in portraying like Willy Wonka's fall from this like wonderful, naive ray of light that he is as Timothee Chalamet, like to his like world weary Gene Wilder persona. Even though now I know that Gene Wilder was quite young at that point, I still think it would be a good spot to slide Cillian Murphy in there. I think he would do the disillusioned chocolatier quite well.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. I thought of casting a female Willy Wonka, somebody who can be kind of disillusioned but also impish. So I would cast Aquafina in that role. I think she can do both. And then I tried to cast Noodle, but I know zero child or adolescent actors, and I tried to Google adolescent actors, and you know who came up?
Who?
Timothee Chalamet.
Yeah.
Okay, was it better when we were kids?
So what does that question mean? Does that mean, was it only good because we were kids?
Well, it can be however you interpret it. I would say probably yes, it was better when we were kids because we had the original Wonka, and that is truly all you need. But
I
you
disagree.
but you can interpret it differently. Yes.
I never was that into the original movie, and so this one I didn't have, again, low expectations, but greatly exceeded them, and I'm kind of excited about it a lot more than I thought it would have been. So for me, no, it's better now.
There's no way a 6-year-old version of me would have liked this as well as I liked the original.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, watching it as a kid, you need the chocolate to look delicious, right? Like, I think it was better when we were kids.
Now, we already all did this, but would you ever watch this again alone voluntarily?
No, I wouldn't watch it alone, but I would want to share it.
I'd probably watch this if it was on, like I'd flip it on TV and just have it on in the background. That's what I do with musicals.
I would happily watch it again voluntarily, but as Kelly was saying, I don't think I'd need to. Like, I can't wait to share it with everyone I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You also wonder if you'd be disappointed. You know, if like sometimes when you see something for a second time, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not as good.
And we like to rate things on a 1 to 5 star scale, 1 being worst, 5 being best. How would you rate Wonka?
I'd say 4.5.
Oh
Same.
man, this is so hard for me because I'm such a big Willy Wonka supporter, and I just kept comparing it to the original, and I really did like this. But I think, I mean, and I didn't not like it, but the more we talk about the old one.
Are you going to give it a 2?
No, probably 3.5. Are we allowed to give halves?
Yeah.
I just did
Okay,
4.5.
probably 3.5. I don't think it earned a 4. Like I said, there was a big chunk, and I think it's the chunk that you guys like with the giraffe and the running around. And I'm not really into chase scenes and that kind of stuff. Really, you have to really hold my attention through chase scenes. And I didn't think they did. And my mind was wandering a little bit during that whole section. And it's the section with Mr. Bean too.
Yeah.
There was a huge chunk that it didn't work for me, so I can't give it a 4. This isn't binding or anything, right? I'm gonna give it a 3.5.
You're going on record.
Yeah.
Katie, how about you?
I'm giving it 5 stars. I was so...
Wow.
My expectations were in the toilet. I thought it was going to be more along the lines of the Johnny Depp disaster. I thought they were going to try and make it gritty, and they did none of that, and it was so full of joy, and I was so surprised, so I got to give it 5 stars.
Does this make you want to watch the Johnny Depp one again, though, to just see what a train wreck it was?
No, never.
Or...
I hate Tim Burton. I hate Tim Burton movies. They're not for me. It is a constant point of contention between me and my co-host. So I will never watch that again. No.
So overall, see it or skip it?
Yeah,
See it. Yeah.
See it.
Yes.
Especially this time of year. I feel like if you wait till January, it's not going to have quite the magic that it will have in the holiday season.
And it's nice to have a good holiday spectacular to hit up at the theaters. And as we discussed in our last episode, maybe Wish isn't it. So Wonka's a great alternative.
Plus, with the New Year's resolutions, maybe a movie about chocolate isn't going to do well with everybody's New Year's resolutions.
Right.
Yeah,
So
hit it
you
up before
definitely
the
wanna-
resolution.
Maybe they timed it very poorly.
Did they have in the theater that you were at? Did they have like the Wonka, it was like a milkshake, or they had all kinds of crazy stuff they were advertising.
Oh.
No.
Yeah, they had several special concoctions that they had come up with for the movie, and I think it was like a milkshake with cotton candy on top or
Oh,
something.
well,
And
I know
chocolate.
IHOP is having a promotion right now with like purple pancakes and pancake tacos or something, and they say inspired by the movie. I didn't see any of that in the movie.
Uh,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't seen any
Stretch.
promotions that actually have anything to do with chocolate. Like you're saying, pancakes, milkshakes. There's a cookie place near us that has like this purple cookies with like sprinkles, no chocolate.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
Nestle prohibits them from doing that.
Oh,
It's the chocolate cartel.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah,
That chocolate
exactly.
cartel.
They'll get their head put into frozen water and pulled out again over repeatedly.
It's just
Threats.
life imitating art, really, isn't it?
Oh, well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of It's My Screen Time Too. Thank you to Alex and Kelly for joining us today. Guys, tell us where our listeners can find you and the Dirt Nap City podcast.
Go ahead, Alex.
No, you go, Kelly. You're the one that sets all this stuff up. I mean, I think you can find us wherever you find podcasts,
Yep.
and it's Dirt Nap City, and it's the show about interesting dead people.
Yep.
And we're going to be having some YouTube shorts coming up, I think.
We are.
We publish every other week.
Yep, we're going to try to do a little more often. But yeah, and also Alex has made this clear. If you guys have heard it, it's not about death. It's not about that. It's really just the two right criteria are that they have to be interesting and they have to be dead. Like we don't do interesting live people. And then part of it too that we like to do, and hopefully you guys, Katie and Deborah, you picked up on the fact that we're trying to do people that you've heard of but you don't know much about, like Geronimo. Like a lot of people have heard that name but they don't know much about who that was, or
Usually they're not famous enough to have a biopic about them, but
Yeah.
they're famous enough where everybody knows who they are.
Right.
yeah,
Sweet spot.
But they
absolutely.
might know one thing about them.
Yeah, like Rockefeller or Eleanor Roosevelt or Satchel Paige, and then Alex comes up with these really obscure ones like Babe Dietrichson Zacharias. Do either of you know who that is?
Not that obscure.
Sure
Do either of you know who that is?
But it sounds like I have some listening to do.
Yeah.
Well, if you enjoyed our show today, please share it with someone you think might enjoy it too. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyScreenTime2, or send an email to myscreentime2@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your YouTube suggestions, article recommendations, or general comments about the show. Our website is myscreentime2.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter. Our theme music was composed and performed by Deborah and her adorable children, and our podcast is produced by me, Katie. You can hear more from us on our other podcast, Spock Talk, where we discuss the life and legacy of Dr. Benjamin Spock. Tune in next time for more real talk about the movies and TV we watch with our kids because we have to, and sometimes because we like to. Bye!
Screen time, screen time, screen